ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, and water friends. Thank you very much for participating in today's World Water Day event organized by the Bonn Water Network. Today's event will be recorded, as you probably just heard. My name is Dr. Luna Bharati, and I'm the host of today's event. I'm a principal scientist working with the International Water Management Institute, IMI, and co-spokesperson for the Bonn Water Network. From the City of Bonn as a major hub for sustainable development and Germany's UN city for 25 years, the Bonn Water Network was launched in November 2020. The Bonn Water Network bundles the capacities of renowned Bonn-based institutions working on water and related issues in international research, development, policy, and capacity building. In spite of our network's very recent establishment just a few months ago, the network has already been successful in attracting large audiences from all over the world in its 3 online events in 2020. I'm happy to also announce that our network has also grown and now consists of 10 members. You can see the logos up here in the slide. I'm also very happy to be collaborating today with Professor Janos Bogardi to organize today's event for World Water Day and launch the Handbook of Water Resources Management, where I was also fortunate to contribute as an author. Professor Bogardi had initiated the Bonn Water Lectures around 15 years ago, which has now evolved into this Bonn Water Network. So this year's World Water Day is about what water means to people, its true value, and how we can better protect this vital resource. 70% of the human body is made up of water, and coincidentally, more than 70% of the earth is also covered with water. Therefore, there's no argument about water being fundamental to life and livelihoods. However, water is also at the root of many issues our planet and people are facing, and these issues in turn are linked to the ever-changing mosaic of water values. Competition for water by different water use sectors, debates regarding water infrastructure development versus nature conservation, and lack of access to water due to economic and social constraints can lead to conflicts and degradation of water resources. Therefore, it is important to first acknowledge the fact that the expressions of the value of water can be multifold, and second, fostering an enabling environment for the willingness to cooperate to manage and preserve this blue gold is important. So yeah, thank you. Now I would like to take you through our program for the next 1.5 hours. Audience, we've decided that we will manage audience interactions through the Q&A box. And Andreas Haller from ZEF will provide technical support, and we are really very thankful for that. We will first watch a pre-recorded welcome address by Mrs. Katja Dörner, the mayor of Bonn. We will continue then with the official launch of the Handbook of Water Resources Management, Discourses, Concepts, and Examples, which was published or which will be published in 2021 by Springer in the coming months. The book will be presented by Margaret Deignan, Senior Editor with Springer Nature, and Dr. Janos Bogardi, Chief Editor of the Handbook. The next speaker, of whom we are very proud to present and welcome, is Dr. Danilo Türk, the former president of Slovenia, who is now working with the Geneva Water Hub. The book launch will be followed by a roundtable discussion moderated by Annabelle Hudred, who is also, a spokesperson for the Bonn Water Network, with several authors of the handbook, and members of the Bonn Water Network. They will highlight their contributions and also refer to the World Water Day's topic, of valuing water. So now we will hear a short video recording from Madam Mayor, Mrs. Katja Dörner.
Happy World Water Day 2021. Water is the main source of all life, a cross-cutting need and challenge on the pathway towards a sustainable global development for every human settlement, whether urban or rural. Water is a cross-cutting topic in Bonn, both in global and in local terms. The United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification is fighting drought and land degradation from Bonn. And only recently has UN Habitat moved GWOPA, the Global Water Operators Partnership Alliance, to the Rhine, a perfect match to the many organizations in our city conducting research on or implementing water solutions in Bonn and in the wider field of development cooperation. GWOPA is planning to hold a Water Operator Partnership Congress in Bonn this autumn. Our research community has rallied with other partners in the Bonn Water Network as a new platform fostering exchange and joint research. Locally, Bonn is a river city, for the best and for the worst. We are used to the floods of the River Rhine. Climate change has also led to an increase of heavy rains resulting in rapid stream flooding. On the other hand, we are facing more droughts during the summer season. As the board member of ICLAI Local Governments for Sustainability, I see water at the base of any sustainable urban development, from nature-based solutions to resilience, from circular solutions to people-centered development. This year, Bonn is celebrating 25 years as a United Nations city. UN Bonn has evolved as the UN hub for sustainability with land, nature, climate and water at its heart. On this World Water Day, I commend all the key players for water in Bonn and thank them for their tireless efforts to shape a sustainable water future for all.
Okay, now I would like to invite Mrs. Margaret Deignan, Senior Editor from Springer, to introduce Professor Bogardi and the book.
Okay, thank you, Luna. Thank you, everybody, for joining in today, and welcome to this session. Also, thank you to the Bonn Water Network for allowing me to make this presentation today. It's a great honor and a privilege to introduce Professor Janos Bogardi, who's the lead or chief editor of this publication, which is entitled The Handbook of Water Resources Management, and the subtitle Discourses, Concepts and Examples. So, as I said, it's a great honor for me to introduce Professor Bogardi, who has a long and distinguished career. His contribution to water resource management, hydrology and hydraulics has been outstanding. He received a degree in civil engineering at the Technical University of Budapest, and throughout his career has had many positions and professorships at a number of institutions and universities, including the University of Karlsruhe, Asian Institute of Technology in Bangkok, the Wageningen Agricultural University in the Netherlands, and he was the Chief of Section, Division of Water Science and Water Science at UNESCO in Paris from 2003 to 2009. And this was also in parallel with being the Vice Rector of Europe at the time. He was the founding director of the United Nations Institute for Environment and Human Security, and this is a position that he held until his retirement. Professor Bogardi is a senior fellow at the Center for Development Research, University of Bonn, and is also a fellow of the Stellenbosch Institute for Advanced Study in South Africa. As well as having a fantastic professional career, Professor Bogardi has also had an extensive and healthy publication history, and to date has published more than 200 publications. He's authored and co-authored many journal articles, book chapters, and books. Most recently, of course, and the reason we're here today, the Handbook of Water Resources Management, where as the lead editor, he's worked tirelessly with the editorial team and the author group in ensuring the publication. He's really been the tour de force behind the publication and making sure that everybody stayed engaged and motivated, and he met the deadlines and worked, as I say, tirelessly with our production team in ensuring everything was on time. The handbook provides an overview of facts, theories, methods from hydrology, geology, geophysics, and many other scientific disciplines. On a more personal note, I would just like to say how much of a great pleasure it has been and an honor to work with Professor Bogardi on this collaboration. We've been together on a journey that is the adventure of book publishing, and I'm delighted to have been part of the process. And Springer Nature is both extremely proud and thankful to be included, to include the handbook in our publication list at Springer. We believe that the handbook is a solid and worthwhile contribution to the international water discourse and will provide ideal resource for professionals and students alike. Professor Bogardi will now tell you more about the content of the book, the goals and objectives of the handbook. So thank you very much.
So over to you, Professor Bogardi.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you very much, Margaret, for this introduction. This gives me two thoughts. One is it was too much focused on me, whereas I am only one element and one member of the editorial team and one member of 111 co-authors of this book. Second is, when you tell so much about me, it always reminds me that I am not anymore among the youngest of contributors of this book. But let us concentrate on this book, which has this very long and very detailed title, and I will try to explain why we have selected both the form of a handbook and why a handbook on water resources management needed 3 distinct editions in the title to explain its scope, its origin, and its structure. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. I go back to 2000 when the World Water Vision was launched, and it was a year when the second World Water Forum was organized in The Hague. And the motto of this event and the World Water Vision was "Water is everybody's business." And probably no other slogan can summarize so succinctly what we mean. Water is everybody's business, from the physical presence till whatever we do economically or socially. And when this term was coined, water is everybody's business, we were already in a process of about last 3 decades long process when water gradually became one of the key issues of the international agenda. And this process is highlighted by proliferating number and participants in international events, conferences, summits, water weeks, water fora, nowadays also water webinars. And also the United Nations organization took up this challenge. The Millennium Development Goals from 2000 and the Sustainable Development Goals, especially since 2015 till 2030, with its dedicated water goal, accounts for this growing importance and growing attention towards water and water resources management. The UN also resolved that water access to water supply and sanitation is a human right, and water decades and conventions try to secure these ideas both in the minds and in the governance structure of countries and associations. There are a number of high-level committees and commissions addressed different aspects to the water, and I'm very happy that after my presentation, Dr. Türk, who headed one of these commissions, will comment on the book and on the World Water Day. And this is the last point I put on this slide. Since 1993, 22nd of March is celebrated as a World Water Day with varying topics and varying focus. This year, as you already heard, valuing water. Next slide, please. When we recall these 3 decades of development, water to become a prominent item on the international agenda, you may ask that why do we need 3 decades of discourses, discussions, and some results are still waits to be implemented when everybody agrees that water is so important as it is. And this is probably, as I was an ardent party goer, if I may say so, attending many of these water conferences, you realized that there are very lively water discourses, not only one, but several, and they are sometimes almost antagonistic towards each other, but frequently very much separated. It's so much that some of the technical or scientific associations are simply not present in more public events and vice versa. So there is different dialogues going on parallel, sometimes even contradicting each other. But even if we focus only to the scientific and professional communities, then we realize that there is also a very difficult interdisciplinary divide still around, which needs to be lifted in order to move from discourses towards one unified water discourse, and certainly to water actions and water solutions. These disciplinary barriers, ideological differences, and even the language we use to communicate is different between the different communities participating in this hitherto mentioned parallel water discourses. And this is hampering that we understand each other. So all this positive trend, which we observe since 3 decades, and this relatively hampering features of the debate or the debates led to the conclusion, and if I may have the next slide, please, that we probably have to give an answer to the needs we sensed. And this is what this Handbook of Water Resources Management, Discourses, Concepts, and Examples aims to facilitate that the different communities, different stakeholders who are participating in water discourses learn about each other more, learn about each other's concerns, learn about each other's languages and approaches. What this handbook is doing, it summarizes all the challenges and drivers and constraints in an evolving political and societal embedding within which these discourses take place, but within which even the practical water resources management takes place. The mayor of city mentioned cities, mentioned ICLEI. This is an association of cities for sustainable development. Their water problems are different than that of irrigators. This is different than that of hydropower people, and yet everybody has a share, and we have to bring these shares together so that we understand each other's concerns and languages. We try to present, but also critically analyze key concepts. It's not enough to say integrated water resources management if everybody means something else when we spell out this term. We have to know what we are talking about and what is wrong if one is taking some different course. We are describing the different discourses and try to look into different disciplinary facets of water governance and management of water. We provide engineering solutions and approaches for sustainable water use, water management, and it addresses different contexts not only economic context, also social context, and also including and safeguarding and protection from water and protection of water. Both because our interactions, human-water interaction is not a one-way road. It's not only we use water, water needs our care as well. Next slide, please. The handbook is trying to formalize these different aspects, which I just highlighted in a number of PowerPoints before. Let me try to outline the structure of the handbook. It is started with a foreword by His Excellency János Áder, President of Hungary, who is also the patron of the last three Budapest Water Summits 2013, 2016, and 19. These were very instrumental to firmly establish the dedicated water goal in the Sustainable Development Goals. The background and rationale of the handbook is outlined in chapter 1. Also, we tell what is in and what is not in the book, and start in 4 parts. In the first part is a very brief, succinct summary of the history of water on Earth, management and challenges. It is also a kind of appetizer, or if you want, it is an executive type of reading for those who don't want to submerge reading a handbook, which would take at least a week. Part B is water and society. You see, with 8 chapters, it is one of the biggest part of the book, because it is highlighting different aspects of water and societal interaction with water, economics, ethics, the history, how we dealt with water, also the governance issues, and also discussing several aspects of the discourses. Part C contains examples of how to assess water resources, how to describe their protection needs and their use aspects. And in part D, finally, we put water in different contexts and scales. Context in a way that how water and food relates to each other, how water and natural resources, mining relates to each other, how water and energy, but also how water risk and complex systems with water in their core can be conceptualized and discussed. Next, please. Let me try to characterize originally as an engineer, the handbook with numbers. It has 9 editors, and I am the so-called corresponding editor of this body, who is representing 6 countries. We have, as I mentioned already, 111 contributing authors, residents of 26 countries, and I never ask them to reveal their citizenships, but I expect that we are approximately representing 40 different nationalities in this 111 contributing authors body. We have no gender balance, but we are improving. I believe if this handbook would have been published 10 years ago, the female-male ratio would have been distinctly different. And we are very proud to have an age spectrum of authors who are in their 20s up to authors who are in their 80s. The whole book is approximately 850 pages long, and it took us 60 months. I put the word gestation on purpose because, of course, we did not work 60 months every day on the book, but it was 60 months long process of discussing, trying to persuade people to meet deadlines. So I would say we stepped over a lot of deadlines till we reached this stage that we are able to launch this handbook to be available in very soon. Next, please. What can you expect from this handbook? Before you buy, of course, we are telling only nice things, but it is also important to know what you can expect. It is based on, but it also critically assesses the state of the art. We know a lot about water, but the more we know, we discover even more knowledge is needed to grasp it, to assess it, to manage it, to safeguard it, and to govern it. It is a very broad book, but it's not covering all aspects which might belong the water resources management. We believe there are plenty of excellent books where some more details could be found, but we were very much keen to have a book which is readable by all communities, irrespective whether you have an engineering degree, a law degree, or a sociology degree, or you are simply only an interested person who wants to learn more and to look into the intricacy and complexities of water. Examples are an important feature of this book because we are highlighting, when we discuss state of the art of methods, it is highlighted from different aspects. It's criticized, but not only critically seen by different contexts, like integrated water resources management is discussed from the point of view of governance, from the point of view of traditional water resources management principles, whether it is to cover water basins or jurisdictional areas and so forth. The book is authored heavily by scientists, but not exclusively. We try to have a number of people who are rather practicing water on the front and not only teaching it. It is informative, but also thought-provoking. We are not able to answer every question, as no one is able to answer every question as far as water is concerned, but we try to give the seed of thought which may help the reader to develop his own or her own thoughts and concepts about water. It is called a handbook because it is written in a handbook style, and it targets very explicitly multidisciplinary and also public audience. There are not more than maybe 20 equations in the whole handbook. Last chapter, last slide, please.
Yes, you have 1 minute left.
Last slide, please. Yes, thank you. There's one more slide. Okay. Let me finish why we think that the launch on the World Water Day is an essential feature. The lead theme, as I mentioned, is valuing water. But in order to value something, we have to know it. So then valuing water is much more than paying for it. The handbook will give you a lot of good guidance how to value water in all its facets. It, as value judgment, is ethic-based, encoded in laws, rights, and governance, which are all reflected in the book related to water. And it also is a basis of technical and economic decisions. Finally, I go back to the say, humans and water are in an inextricable relationship, and protecting water from people and people from water risks reflects also the value we put on humans and on aquatic life and ultimately water. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, János. And I feel very fortunate to have been able to at least contribute to writing one of the chapters. And I really look forward to holding the physical book in my hands. Thank you. So now I would like to invite Dr. Danilo Türk, His Excellency Danilo Türk, former president of Slovenia, to deliver his remarks. Over to you, Dr. Türk.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Bharati, for allowing me to speak, and thank you for the invitation. And of course, I should start by saying that it's a great pleasure and honor to offer a few remarks on the occasion of the launch of the Handbook of Water Resource Management. And I would like to congratulate Springer Nature for publishing this important book, and to all participants who contributed their essays for the handbook. I would like to congratulate Professor Janos Bogardi for his work as editor and also for his introduction a few moments ago. Now, launching of this important handbook is one of the major events this year and during this World Water Day, which is, as we all know, devoted to valuing water. Now, there can be hardly a better way of commemorating the World Water Day than by launching this handbook. There are two main reasons why, in my opinion, one ethical and one technical. Valuing water is not about pricing of water. It's much larger and much more fundamental. Valuing water means understanding water and recognizing it as a fundamental value for human survival and human dignity. There is no life without water, and there is no human dignity in conditions of severe water shortages or devastating water disasters. Moreover, unlike other natural resources, water has no substitute. The only substitute for water is water. Now, this, ladies and gentlemen, are fundamentally ethical considerations. Valuing water means recognizing these basic facts and considering all the benefits provided by water, social, economic, environmental, and other dimensions. Water is precious. Competition over water is increasing in our era with an alarming pace, and water stress is becoming more and more serious and more global. Water stress is caused not only by water shortages, but also by pollution and inefficient use of water resources. And all of this is exacerbated by climate change. The main medium of climate change and in its adverse effects is again water. The problem of water management is increasingly important, increasingly complex, and increasingly global. And in this context, it might be worth recalling what Professor Bogardi just explained. There are many discussions about this, and there are many overlapping discourses which are not necessarily coherent. And therefore, the handbook we are launching today is a very precious contribution to future debates. Now, let me say a few words about the technical reason for praising the launch of this book. Now, more than 40 decades ago, the UN Water Conference in Mar del Plata, Argentina, announced the concept of integrated water management. The handbook before us gives specific insights and meaning to water management today. And the handbook includes a variety of aspects, from ethical and legal to economic, technical, and organizational. It calls for adaptive decision-making and for adequate monitoring, data management, and assessment. It addresses the problems of global distribution, biodiversity, and ecosystem services. It deals with competition over water resources used for agriculture, energy generation, and mining activities. Now, I would like to add one further element. In the past years, there have been warnings and indeed specific situations of water stress leading to displacement and conflicts at various scales. In several of the ongoing armed conflicts, water infrastructure suffered as a result of inadequate management and even became object of armed attacks. Now, these are serious violations of humanitarian law. Water infrastructure should be respected as critical infrastructure for survival of civilians and should be protected accordingly. In the water-stressed areas of protracted tensions or armed conflicts of low intensity, and in post-conflict situations, water management is an essential condition to establish a path towards stability and durable peace. Water is therefore security. It is basic for food security, for energy security, and security of development and implementation of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals generally. And these are reasons why the world has to value water today. And this is why the Handbook on Water Resources Management that we are launching today is so timely and so important. I thank you for your attention, and I wish the handbook to have many, many readers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Türk, on highlighting the complexities related to water management, and also talking about the value of water in bringing stability, peace, and security. Thank you very much. So now we've reached the second part of the program. So I would like to hand over the moderation to Dr. Annabel Hodre. She's also the second spokesperson of the Bonn Water Network. So over to you, Annabel.
Thank you so much, Luna, and welcome also from my side. It's great to see that we have over 100 people participating from all over the world. I thank you a lot to the former speakers for introducing the book. It's fascinating, and I think we need more than one more lockdown to be able to read it, right? So let's go into the details now and see how the authors of the book that are present today appreciate the value of water in their different chapters. I will start with Marsa Motlak from the ICB Bonn Alliance. Marsa, you are working on digitalization in the water sector, really fascinating topic. So in your opinion, how can new digital technologies contribute to better valuing water for sustainable resource governance?
Thank you, Annabelle. Thank you all. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining our session, and thanks for all the speakers. And I'm very honored to be here. Answering your question, Annabelle, I would like to just shortly give an overview on the digitalization in the water sector from the perspective of water security, the value of water, and also talking about sustainability, the main concern. Well, we know that nowadays digitalization is impacting our society from all aspects. And concerning that, water and digitalization have been connected along their path of development, and that innovative combination of these two sectors have provide new capabilities for water security and future sustainable water that we are all looking forward to. And also thinking about the fundamental aspects of digitalization, which are kind of impacting the water sector in many different ways. Looking at all of these dynamic and these new paradigm shifts in the solutions, smart solutions or digital solutions that we have to call them, and looking at them and see how they are different solutions bringing in new idea from the valuing water through our systems and to the management of water resources. An uptake of digital technology has increased these days, and the water sector is just kind of taking advantage on that. But on the other hand, it is still very behind from the other sectors. Look at health sector, transportation, and others. Still, digitalization in water sector is not well defined and not well understood. And this is because that we are still looking at it as silos. And we are not looking at it as a integrated way into the water security and water resources management in a broad version. So we have this kind of separated and disconnected development going on, which is still not yet well connected and well understood. And as Professor Bogardi already mentioned, maybe the start can be then creating the common language and common understanding among the stakeholders about the issue and the challenges, opportunity and risks that digitalization is bringing to the water sector first, and then start making these solutions and coming up with new management systems. Well, when we talk about digitalization in the water sector, we refer to a wide variety of different technical and digital solutions. We talk about the blockchain, we talk about ICT, development of big data analytics, we talk about the smart utilities and sensors and lots of different cloud computing and all of the others, which if we look at it, they are all going to bring in a very huge paradigm shift in the water industry. But on the other hand, this potential impact of digitalization and artificial intelligence on water security, even though it is significant and it is very impressive, but it is coming with new challenges, new topics, new consideration and complexities, which going to be adding on the previous challenges we already had. So these potential pitfalls which digitalization brings to water resources management in all aspects is something that we have to consider. For instance, we talk about social and ethical considerations of digitalization and digital technologies, and it can be very important when we look at it from the water angle. And the biases in discrimination and somehow confusion in decision making on the governance level, if you are looking at it, these are not yet understood well, and these are not yet addressed. And this is something that is not going to be very easy to digest in the system, and we have to be very mindful and aware about these impacts. And I'm just thinking that these changes are very interesting. It is here, it is unavoidable. So we can't do anything about it, but we can start being mindful about them and having like a common vision, bringing like a common roadmap for knowing as water actors, water stakeholders and experts and decision makers, politicians, whoever is kind of like as a water users, so then getting impact and also impacting the water sector to know about all of those changes and be mindful about these newcomers and see what to do with it to make sure it is going to be sustainable for a long time decision making and procedure. Well, I am thinking to begin with, it is going to be the integration and collaboration is the start point. So starting with awareness, starting to identify where these technologies come from, how it can be sustainably measured, and how it can be used in a way that it is not going to exclude some part of the community or some part of the different aspects of the water, especially social and ethical, as I've mentioned. So we need to see where to start and then agree on it. And if we talk about it from the peace building domain, so we have to see if we want to make sure that conflict at all levels is not going to be increased, it should be somehow some consensus on the digitalization in water sector, which there is still not yet there. And we have to start from somewhere, and I would like to emphasize on it. And I believe it is a start, good start, and we have to make sure all those opportunities remain opportunity rather than become risks. And currently, in my current research, I'm investigating on that, and it is very interesting to be here and share it with you. And yeah, so thank you for giving me that opportunity to talk about it, and hopefully we are all going to.
Thank you so much, Masa, for raising our awareness on the multiple challenges also linked to the digitalization. Now we jump to the irrigation topic. I would like to ask Bernard Tischbein from the Institute for Development Studies, CEF. Bernard, in the context of high demand for irrigation water, there are often negative environmental impacts. For instance, on the quality of the soil. So how can we better balance these trade-offs in valuing water?
Yeah, thank you very much, Annabelle, for that question. Thank you for giving the opportunity to me to participate in that important event. Let me try to answer that question in 3 steps. Firstly, a view on the current situation of irrigation. Then secondly, a quick thinking, what is meant by valuing water in relation to irrigation. And then in a on the last slide, I will put some or summarize some steps how to reach that valuing. Yeah. What is the situation? Irrigated agriculture is by far the biggest water user. Globally, more than 70% of all water withdrawals go into irrigated agriculture, and that is reflected, that importance of irrigated agriculture is reflected in a book chapter on water and land management. If we look on the situation of irrigated agriculture, I would say we are on a balancing act. On the one side, irrigation is needed to achieve food security, but on the other side, irrigation is exerting very, very severe impacts. Think about the Aral Sea dilemma with all these harmful consequences. And the future is even becoming more challenging. The requirements will increase, there's population growth, there's a change of nutrition behavior, there's urbanization, industrialization, and this is in contrast to water availability becoming more complex. We have the climate change impacts, which Major already mentioned. We have a sharpening competition for water between the sectors and even between countries in transboundary basins. So what do we mean in irrigation by valuing water? I would say we have to maximize the contribution to food security and to minimize adverse impacts on water and soil in terms of quality and quantity. And that is, let me add that as a researcher at CEF, that is a prerequisite for sustainable development. That is due to the basic meaning of water. In arid region, without irrigation, there is no agriculture. Without agriculture, there is no economy, and that is then stabilizing the livelihoods and the society. So in that last step, I would then like to give some ideas how to break down that goal into operational targets and into tools. So irrigation needs to become much more appropriate. That means meeting site and time-depending requirements, needs to become more efficient, more strict performance assessment, more flexible scheduling, advanced handling of technologies, sensors, optimization of hydraulic systems, what Masa was just pointing out, digitalization needs to be used. These more efficient, more appropriate irrigation we need to put into the agricultural, the overall agricultural input application system. So we need a better coordination between irrigation schedules and fertilizer plans. And these more technical tools need to be embedded in the overall context by inter and transdisciplinary approaches. So we need to create incentives for water saving. We need to provide training for water end users. We need to utilize more the bottom-up creativity and the innovation potential of the water users, which is there. They need more long-term planning reliability to really invest in often costly but promising irrigation techniques. We need a better understanding of the innovation dissemination processes. And what is very, very much important, we need to assure the participation of the water end users. Let me close. We also need to see where are the limits of expanding irrigation. So we have also to think about alternatives, afforestation, fish ponds, stepping deeper in the value chains. So I mentioned a lot of, let's say, single tools, strategies, interventions, and these at the end need to be synthesized, and I see two major lines or roads for synthesizing. One is the water line. We need to embed irrigation schemes by hydrological modeling into the overall context of the basins, and we need to come to a water allocation which is considering the governance issues, and for that the integrated water resources management concept idea can guide.
Thank you so much, Bernhard, for putting forward the value of water and irrigation, but also, of course, the trade-offs that are implied and the comprehensive solutions by IWRM. So let me go to Zita Sebesvari from UNU EHS. I know you work a lot with ecosystem-based solutions on adaptation and disaster risk reduction. So do you see potential synergies to increase aquatic ecosystem health and increase the value of water?
Thank you very much, Annabelle, for the question, and also a very warm welcome from my side to everyone. And to answer the question, I would like to step back just one step and bring you to Hungary, to the Lake Balaton, where I spent, I think it was around 6 years ago, good 7 to 10 days together with Professor Bogardi, working very intensively on a product called water quality for ecosystems. And that was a very special product we worked on together for quite a while. And I very much remember those days at the Lake Balaton, where we also developed together this figure I am showing to you. And the figure you will find in chapter 11 of the book, lead authored by Professor Bogardi, where I was fortunate enough to contribute. So if you look at the figure, it shows a very well-known deep sea model, the drivers, pressure, state, impacts, responses model, which we are taught to actually further develop with a stressor step. And so if you look at it, that's the one highlighted in blue. The stressors are, so to say, the consequences of the anthropogenic pressures, which actually then manifest themselves as stressors in the aquatic ecosystems and influence then the state of the aquatic ecosystem. And we found it quite helpful to introduce this additional step into the cycle, and it helped us actually to highlight how anthropogenic activities exactly influence ecosystem health, and then also ecosystem services. And this is where my current work comes in, which relates to ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction and adaptation, where actually the state of these ecosystems very much influences how far and what kind of services can be generated, including those relevant for adaptation and disaster risk reduction. So in terms of valuing, one of the learnings from that joint work was that valuing of water also depends of the beneficiaries you put in place, you put into the equation, right? So in this work, we very much seen ecosystems as one major beneficiary of good water quality and quantity, by the way, as well. And with that, of course, your whole valuation concept changes. So if ecosystems are eligible recipients of those services provided actually by good water quality, in this case, you see the entire valuation debate in a different light. There is a good body of literature actually showing the relation between ecosystem health and those services provided. Although if you really dig deep, there are not too many research papers available which really quantify those linkages. So still some work ahead of the scientific community. If you go to the next slide, this brings us to my second contribution to the book, which was in chapter 15, where we looked at catchment scale changes and its impacts on water quality. Specifically here, I highlighted land use and water quality. So this chapter provides you the state of the art, the scientific evidence we have, showing how those catchment related changes actually manifest itself in deteriorating water quality. It's again interesting in terms of valuing water, because those changes on the catchment scale are many times driven either by agriculture, forestry, or urbanization. And whenever we plan those changes, we not necessarily take into account the impacts on water quality. and how this will again change the value of that water for other uses, such as for ecosystems, but also for irrigation, as Dr. Tischbein mentioned, and also for other eligible uses. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Zita. So we're going to the river basin level now, which is also a main perspective of the integrated water resource management perspective. Ines Dombrovski from the German Development Institute, you have contributed a chapter on water governance, which among others discusses the role of river basin organizations in water management. So what role do you think could these organizations play in mediating different water needs, also maybe with respect to irrigation, and mediating different values? And what do you know about the effectiveness?
Yeah, thank you very much, Annabelle, and thanks for inviting me to this roundtable today. And thanks, Professor Bogardi, for having me invited to be part of the book. And I'm also very much looking forward to seeing the 850 pages and how heavy they're going to be. Yeah, so I contributed to a chapter on water governance and policies jointly with Claudia Falboster and Naomi Romaci. And in that chapter, we do look at water governance broadly at various scales and across various scales and sectors. So the river basin dimension is just one, but certainly one that has been heavily discussed during the last decades. So what is the background here? I mean, you all know that in water management and governance, we have the challenge that we face problems of fit between hydrological and administrative boundaries. And this leads to externalities from one administration or jurisdiction to the others. And therefore, there has been a call for river basin management, so the management of the water resources at the scale of the river basin, and even a call for the establishment of river basin organizations. When we look into the establishment of such organizations, we see in the IWM stocktake event of 2012 that 87% of the countries interviewed had already mechanisms for river basin management or had started to establish such mechanisms, and in half of these cases they were advanced. River basin organizations may take many different forms. For instance, Hooper distinguished 9 different categories of river basin organizations, just taking the different notions that are being used. Mostert distinguished the hydrological and the coordinated model. However, I think it was Heutemer and Meyering that really established a more systematic categorization. This is distinguishing 4 different types: autonomous river basin organizations that really have constitutional powers and are themselves accountable towards the electorate; agencies that perform specialized state functions; coordinating RBOs that basically coordinate different state agencies and jurisdictions; and partnership RBOs that are more bottom-up from the non-state actors established and based on these. Now, if you ask me what is the role of RBOs in mediating different water needs and values, I would say that in particular the latter organizations, so the coordinating RBOs and in particular the partnership RBOs, are certainly the ones that give most voice to different perspectives, to different water needs, and where there's the greatest chance that different water values can be discussed and evaluated. But certainly also a more top-down perspective can bring some value, I mean, bring out different water values. But if you want to hear the voices, then these more collaborative undertakings are certainly more promising. However, one should also note that RBOs have been discussed very critically in the literature as well. given that maybe not all of them have lived up to their expectations, and more conceptually, authors such as Timothy Moss have also asked, well, do maybe RBOs solve problems of PIT, but maybe they even increase problems of institutional interplay. So let's have a short look at their effectiveness, and that's on the next slide, please. I mean, measuring the effectiveness of RBOs is certainly demanding. There are problems of attribution, there are problems of time lags. If you establish an RBO, you are not immediately in a position to see whether it delivers impacts on the ground. There can also, the effectiveness can also change over time. Really strict comparative case studies are still rare. One example, which I quite like, is a comparative analysis by Meyer, Inc. and Heitema from 2014 to 17, where they compared 11 cases. And the table just shows the cases and the countries of origin and the type of RBO, and their performance in terms of two indicators, namely coordination across sectors and scales or levels, and their environmental effectiveness. And if you look at the colors, you can see that in terms of coordination, only 4 of the 11 have good coordination qualities, while 5 are poor. And if you look at environmental effectiveness, only 2 are good, while 3 are poor and 5 are unknown. However, I still think, I think that the cases that show good performance are really interesting cases where these organizations really made a difference. So these organizations can make a difference, but they do not necessarily do so. And we also see quite some differences between developed and developing countries. I think there's an emerging consensus in the literature that funding is key for these organizations to work, but it's certainly no sufficient condition. Many forms can work, but one has to notice that RBOs usually add a layer on top of general purpose jurisdictions, but do not replace them. That certainly the effectiveness of the RBOs hinges on their ability to manage institutional interplay and to manage the different general purpose jurisdictions. So in that sense, the lighter versions, the coordinating types and partnership types are probably more promising. And along these lines, I also see that there's a strong sense in the governance literature that more polycentric arrangements, not only working on the basis of one organization, but bringing different actors together work best. And that would also, again, be the answer to the value in question. And with that, I thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Ines. And I think this large variety of topics and disciplines that we have covered now in the roundtable is only a very small indicator about how fascinating this book even is. I think it's even more a library than a book. So now I'm even more eager to read it. I would now like to invite the public, because I'm sure you have many questions. Please ask them in the Q&A section. And then Luna and myself will be happy to moderate.
Okay, so we already have a very provocative question from an anonymous attendee. So I would like to ask either János or one of the authors or panelists. The anonymous attendee asks, we already have so many general handbooks about water resources management. What is the innovation of this one? So János, would you like to defend the handbook?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for this question. I was planning to say that there are many, many books, excellent books, so why to write a new one? The difference is what I might have to emphasize once more. We wanted to write a book which is written by lawyers for engineers and engineers for lawyers and vice versa, so that everybody who has a stake in water discourses, debate, or only interested has an opportunity to see different views, either disciplinary backgrounds or some kind of stakeholder, but mainly disciplinary versatility in a language which is understandable to those who did not study the same subject. Irrigation, as Dr. Tischbein showed, is an extremely complex thing. But write irrigation to see what are the key issues, what are the biggest challenges, which can and should be understood by everybody who is in the water discourse, to understand why an irrigator is arguing the way he or she is doing. This is, I believe, the biggest contribution of this book. This is at least our aim, and I would be happy if this person who asked this question purchases the book, reads it, and then comes back and with critical comments, of course, and also if something is convincing, also tell us, yes, it was well done. But everything can be done better. So if the best is if the next book will be written by those who do not find this book so good. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm just going to the chat again. There are several referring to the network, which I will be happy to answer at the end, and also direct you to our new website at the end. Any more content related? Sorry, I keep losing the chat. I would have a question maybe to the authors. We see that it is pretty difficult to uphold the flag of the environment, the ecosystem's need of water. So who, in your view, is the best advocate of valuing water for the environment? Maybe any of the authors or János? Because the environment usually doesn't have a strong lobby. Yes, Zita, please.
I am a lobby for the environment. No, but I think it's if you see how much ecosystem-based solutions or nature-based solutions are actually gaining traction in terms of seeing them as a solution for adaptation purposes and also for disaster risk reduction, and partially also for mitigation, right? So if we consider this, and if we do implement solutions with this very purpose, we really have to take care that those ecosystems are actually monitored and also can be in a good state. Otherwise, we will not receive those benefits we are implementing them for. And so this is again a very anthropocentric argumentation for ecosystem health, but this is one which actually is increasingly heard. There is a lot of implementation of these solutions nowadays, and there's no way to just implement them and not to maintain the health of those ecosystems and not to assure that those services are actually provided. So if we didn't manage in the past to actually protect those ecosystems for their intrinsic value, which is for sure a good reason to maintain them as well. At least now we can do it for those services we do hope to receive. Also, if you think about the pandemic context right now, there's a lot of discussion about green recovery, and all this cannot be taught without taking care for ecosystem state and health. Thank you.
Thank you, Sita. I saw a question specifically to Dr. Tischbein, and there's a comment from Waltina Scheumann, and she writes, in irrigation, the real problem is not primarily water management, but agricultural policies and lack of extension services. So do you have any comments regarding this message, Dr. Tischbein?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I'm agree. I would go back to what Professor Bogardi was mentioning. We need, or one purpose of that book is to strengthen finding common language. So it depends a bit on the view, and we have to bring the views together. From my point of view, what we have to do is to combine, let's say, bottom-up approaches. And bottom-up approaches means empowering the people, the water end users, be it in technical, be it in logistical, be it digitalization. We have to empower the people on the ground who handle the water. This is one thing. And the second is that needs to be complemented, what was in the very correctly part of the question. We need also a top-down approach. We need to create framing conditions which direct people to go for water saving. So that is an interplay between, I would say, the top-down approaches. That means create an enabling environment, and at the other side to complement that by bottom-up issues. So completely agreed. I think everybody is still a bit a child of his discipline, so everybody has his view. But here, that is, I think, a good opportunity to bring these views together. So that is what is needed.
Okay, I would like to take two questions to János. One by Ursula Schäfer-Preuss. Coordination in the water scene is such a challenge, and of course she knows what she's talking about because she's been working on that level for a long time. So do you have any idea how we can move on at this and at the UN level?
This is a very mean question, because as a former UN bureaucrat or diplomat, whatever word wants to use, I would have to defend the organization. Of course, let me go back in the 1960s. The UN those days tried to establish something like a UN water coordination place in New York, and this finally did not materialize. Within the UN system, we have instead the UN water, which is a mechanism. This is a very important thing to emphasize. It is not yet another UN organization, but a mechanism to bring together the different UN agencies and also internationally active agencies, networks, and initiatives to address things together. And it worked well. It had, for example, here in Bonn, the UN Water Decade Program for Capacity Development. It is also, if you have a mechanism like UN Water, you have to use it. If you do not give it task, if it is not mandated to do things, then all organizations can become a debate club. I'm not saying that the UN Water is a debate club, but because I do not follow it anyhow in these years so closely what it is doing, but definitely the way is Ines showed the point, this multicentric solutions. If we say water is everybody's business and everybody has a right to be active in water, so it's no point to create yet another super body to say I am the water boss and I am telling what it is, but use these mechanisms. And these mechanisms are, in my mind, not always optimally utilized. I'm not saying that with the handbook we solve this problem, but definitely this is an attempt from observing the discourse and the debate to help with a kind of reference book where people can say, hey, you can see it also this way, and haha, the water guy, the water resources engineer looks at it this way because he thought that the lawyer sees the opposite way around, and so forth. I hope I answered at least part of the question. But I know that this is $100 question. If I answer, then you have to put 6 zeros behind the 100 to see the value of the answer.
Thank you, János. So we have a question by Peter Bartuzzi, and he asks, what is the role of life cycle assessment and water footprint in a correct management of water resources? So I'd like to ask any of the speakers or panelists, maybe one or two of you would like to answer this question. Life cycle assessment and water footprint. Yeah. János, would you like to?
Okay, well, I'm not an expert in life cycle assessment, so I would rather comment on a water footprint. Water footprint is an excellent awareness-raising tool, but I am fully aware that in the scientifically how to account and how to calculate water footprint, it is not uncontroversial. There is also the say you are calculating not the footprint but the shoe size, because the footprint depends not only the weight of the shoe holder but also on which type of underground you are walking. There are parts of the world which are very robust as far as water resources availability, distribution is concerned, and there are some where even half of the load on the water environment would be disastrous. As I said, it is a good attempt to calculate what do we do with water. But let me be, and again, admittedly, it is my own professional bias, if you like. I don't like to have a statement that 1 cup of coffee is 140 liters of water, because it is not consumptive use, it is utilization, but the water, if you are after washing the coffee beans, properly treated and returned back to the natural hydrological cycle, it is not consumed. But it makes people think, and this is a value of it.
Thank you. Would Dr. Danilo Türk maybe like to comment on the value of water footprint calculations? Sir, you are muted.
Well, I would certainly agree with Dr. Bogardi that there are different environments, different situations in different parts of the world, which really define the different importance of water footprint. Now, what I think is important is to see how much needs to be done through transboundary or regional cooperations, because these situations are rarely happening within a single country, but are often influenced by the fact that water resources and water phenomena in general are regional or transboundary. Just think about the whole area of Sahel, for example. There, I think one has to be rather region specific, and without a regional approach, I don't think very much can be achieved. Now, this is not the moment to go into details of that situation, or, you know, Middle East or any other water stressed or water sensitive situation. But again, the specific conditions have to be taken into account. And secondly, and this brings me to a question that was raised earlier about the UN water. You see, I agree with Professor Bogardi that UN water is a mechanism within the United Nations, which probably has no alternative at this point. I mean, you know, every organization, every fund, agency, or organ of the UN is addressing water issues one way or the other. So it has to be a mechanism involving everybody, and that means 32 entities of the UN system participating in UN water and chairmanship rotating. So you can imagine that it's not easy to do something very effective on this sort of basis. But the important thing is to give that body a specific sets of tasks. And this hasn't been done this hasn't been done in a sufficient measure. I think that that's a very important entry for the future. If in this year, when we are starting with discussions on valuing water, to 2023 with the high-level event in the UN, we come to a point which could agree on an agenda on monitoring, coherence in the UN system in both monitoring and developing region-specific recommendations. Now that would be a major step forward. I'm not sure whether the UN is capable of achieving that, but clearly the principle should be that there should be specific program. There should be specific tasks, not necessarily many, but specific tasks for the UN water as a whole. And of course, General Assembly can do that. Secretary General of the UN, who will be preparing a report to give the basis for discussion, can lead in that direction. So it's not impossible. The question is whether all of us who are working on water issues will be able to bring our overlapping discourses into a more coherent form and then help developing such specific tasks.
Okay, thank you so much for these insights. I would like to take two practical questions on the book, maybe to Margaret Deignan and János. First, beside the printed version, asks Jan Lentvar, is the handbook also available in electronic form? And then by Sabrina Kirschke, will there be an executive summary of the book with the most important lessons learned for practitioners, specifically policymakers? So maybe the two of you can respond to that.
Okay, thank you. Shall I take the first question regarding the type of books? Yes, indeed, the book will be available in print and in electronic format. It will be hosted on our Springer Link platform. And so it's possible to download the whole book in one PDF file, but also it's possible to view the abstracts, which are freely available online, and then that will give you insight into the chapter, which can be downloaded at chapter level, also as a PDF.
So when do you expect it to be available?
Quite soon, actually. I think we're in the last processes of checking everything, and yeah, certainly within the next couple of months for sure. Okay, thank you. And maybe János would like to mention the executive summary.
Yeah. Thank you for the question. Well, it is a handbook, and we did not envisage a kind of executive summary because I would not say there is no coherent message. The point is rather that in a handbook where we wanted to show the versatility and to highlight, let's say, the same, I just take the example of integrated water resources management is being discussed at least in 3, if not 4 chapters. It means that there are different views, not necessarily and not contradicting, but giving different perspectives. And now, if we have 4 perspectives in a book highlighting an issue from 4 different angles, and then we make a summary, then you either have the summary that it can be seen right, left, north, and south, or you select one and you say this is the right one, and then you make a value judgment. And again, this is not serving what Dr. Türk said, to bring the discourses together. Bring the discourses together means that we accept that there might be different interpretation almost of the same word or the same idea, depending on different backgrounds or different concerns. And we should learn from each other and understand each other's points for a better and more cohesive and comprehensive common discourse. So I hope you are not disappointed not to have an executive summary. It is not a report which was given to a think tank to present, and you have to write in 4 pages for those who have only 10 minutes to read, and you have to write in 3,000 pages for those who live from this type of work. It is for everybody, and you a little bit have to find both what you agree with and what you have to confront and try to come to a kind of mental discussion with an idea. Yes.
Thank you, Janos. I have a question for Ines on river basin organizations. So this person, he wrote a very long question, but basically he's asking, what is the recipe for a successful RBO or a functioning RBO? So what, yeah.
Thanks a lot for the question. This is, I mean, I guess you're also already giving part of the answer in your question. Really, it is a lot about political will, but it is also about, I mean, these organizations need to have the basic funding in order to be able to operate. If they don't, it can be very tough. I mean, then you simply rely on personal commitment. But then it is so much about really managing all these interlinkages. The various institutions concerned, I mean organizations concerned, but also the stakeholders involved. So the ability to organize processes and to organize communication and to keep that up running and then to synthesize inputs and so on. These are certainly important features of these organizations if they work well. I think we have some quite well working organizations in that regard in Germany, which also have the legal form of cooperatives. So in North Rhine-Westphalia, we have cooperatives that organize where municipalities, different companies, and different legislative or administrative bodies are members of these organizations. That can work quite well. But we also have many paper tigers. Thanks.
Okay, I'm sorry, we're running out of time, but I would like to take one last question maybe. How should governance shape the digitalization of water in order to help valuing it in developing countries? So digitalization is there, but what do we make out of it in order to serve the value of water? Masa, please.
Thank you, Annabelle. Well, it's a very broad question, but I'm trying to just give some insight to it. So in my opinion, it should be new governance model should be developed, and just to ensure the availability of water for all sectors, and based on understanding of the true value of water, well, in the digital era, of course, and we have to use fit for purpose mechanisms and adaptive and transdisciplinary techniques for sure in the governance. And we have to see in all of the other domains such as e-governance, e-diplomacy are evolving, and all of those like channels being already progressive in many ways, and we have to consider that in that new governance models. Well, it can be started with identifying where digitalization and artificial intelligence is impacting the governance procedure and where it is used and how it is, and then addressing these ethical and social downsides of it, and then just like kind of support the inclusive multi-stakeholder digital governance. That would be my answer. It's not going to be easy to achieve, of course, but it can be considered for sure. There's some changes in the current governance models which we are already using.
Okay, then maybe one very, very last, so that we can cover more or less everyone who had a question. And there were two questions referring to indigenous people. Indigenous people, how can we empower them? They are articulate spokespersons and they have important water needs. In some cases, access to water means survival for them. So how to make their voice heard and how to empower them. That was a concern of two different people here. Who would like to take the floor?
Well, maybe I can start. I mean, I guess there are certainly no easy recipes, but it's a very important question, and it's a bit similar to the how can the environment dimension be really heard. I think, I mean, one starting point is certainly to take these issues really serious in our research in the first place. So to somehow yeah, give voices through appropriate research that brings out this dimension that is often silenced in the political process, and in that sense also to advocate for these aspects. Then there are certainly certain legal mechanisms also at UN level, but yeah, it's probably in many cases important to give voices to these people.
Just to add shortly, Bernard mentioned bottom-up approaches and decentralized approaches, and this is coming, out more and more. That, I mean, solutions, they can't always just be top-down and force-fed, that decentralized solutions are the answer, adaptive solutions. And so this is where you can then also engage at the very low level with, at the farmer level, community level, etc.
Maybe if I'm allowed to make one or two comments very, very briefly. Obviously, there is no single formula. There is no single formula for making people heard and influencing decisions. But one should start by one very simple agreement, and that is water is not merely a technical issue. Water is deeply political issue. And then, of course, there are different ways of approaching it. In some places, there will be sufficient civil society energy that can, create an appropriate bottom-up pressure that leads to solutions. That's in some situations, not all. In other situations, you would need enlightened political leaders. If I may say, as an example, the President Senghor of Senegal, who initiated the Senegal River Basin, that was an example of enlightened political leadership, which was necessary and which led to a very successful mechanism for a river basin organization. And then, of course, there are situations where UN agencies can play a very important role. They have in some occasions in the past, but if one thinks today about Sahel again, Sahel is a place where the UN is trying to figure out a more comprehensive approach, not based only on the peacekeeping and whatever was done so far. Now, that more comprehensive approach has to include a convincing water strategy. Without that, it's not going to function. And therefore, that's incumbent on the UN system. In other words, there is a variety of things, but it all starts with the recognition that water is not only technical, it's a deeply political issue, and one has to find the right approach.
That's an excellent closing remark to the panel. Thank you so much, Dr. Türk. So I would like to thank all the contributors for introducing this fascinating book and sharing your views on valuing water. And I think we're now all very much looking forward to know more about it. So on the occasion of the World Water Day, I also have some very good news on our Bonn Water Network. First, we're happy to let you know that the network is growing. As Luna said, we have 3 new members that you may have seen on our background slides. So the Bonn University's Institute for Hygiene and Public Health, the IUCN Environmental Law Center, and the UN Habitat's Global Water Operators Partnership Alliance. We are very glad that these new institutions contribute to strengthen the expertise of our network in the fields of water and health, but also transboundary water management, and provision of water and sanitation services. Second good news of the day. I'm very proud to announce that our website is ready. So you see the link on the slide presented, and you will also be informed in an email. And you're very much welcome to explore it. And finally, I would like to invite you to our next event, which will be organized on May 18 and introduce the Bonn-based UNESCO Chair on Human Water Systems. You will also be notified by email. In case you don't receive our invitations yet, just drop me an email and don't hesitate to contact us. Thank you so much for being there today. Bye-bye to everyone.